Howdy, 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 and welcome to another episode of the Dirt Info Podcast. As Carter and I mentioned last week, he's currently streaming a race while I record this, so he's a bit preoccupied. Nonetheless, if you could all do us a favor and hit the like down there, it's always greatly appreciated, and I'll do my best to carry the show and make it quick. But with that, let's jump into our first segment, and it
It's called Stylin and Profile.
Thanks, Rick. And sorry, one man show, so we're struggling right out of the gate. Nonetheless, we'll do our best. But I'm wearing a Dennis Zek shirt that I picked up this past weekend from the Racers merch trailer at Granite City. Um, Renazek is a great follow on Facebook. That's the best I could say. He's always him and his wife Laura are always posting, some pretty interesting stuff over there. And he's a pretty good racer too. Talked about him earlier in the season, how he joked about going to Ogilvy as a field filler, and he won the very first Superstock race. So like he's a pretty good racer too. Um, so support the local racer, support the local merch trailer, pick something up, and it's a red. I've been needing a new red, so this will definitely work. Um, so let's. I keep saying let's and us. It's gonna be a struggle, guys. Just deal with, bear with me, and we'll get through it. But so this past weekend, I did go racing. As I mentioned last week, I was going to the MPH Invitational, and I learned, and it should be obvious, but I learned this past weekend that stands for Mod Fours, Pure Stocks, and Hornets, who happen to be the three classes there. So that makes sense. Uh, Headed over to Granite City. It's out like it's hard to say anything not nice about Granite City, or said a different way, I love the place. Honestly, it's one of my favorite places to go. It is right up the road for me. I mean, for me, an hour's right up the road. That's the closest track, but it's fairly near to me as far as racetracks are concerned. And the hospitality is just next level. That is something that strikes me every time I go there. The food is always hot, fresh. They got plenty of options. Don't even get me started on the green chili burrito. It is phenomenal. They had the Chicken Shack chicken for a hot minute this past summer as well, so they're always rotating things in and out, always doing their best to have good hot food. There's just something. I'm fat. Like, let's be honest, I'm a fat, right? I like food, and that is one way to make me like your track. So, uh, it also speaks to how much they care. If they're putting good stuff out there and they're constantly on it, it shows they give a shit. And that matters when it comes to a racetrack. And that is always my impression when I leave Granite City. They give a shit. It might not always go great, and they are learning and they are putting it together night after night, but they care. And that matters so much. So I just really love going there. It is one of my absolute favorite tracks. So I'm a bit of a homer, but anyway, the show was great. I went for the Hornets. I didn't quite get the showdown I was expecting. Jenna Hageman decided not to show. I don't know any more backstory than that, but I had hinted she had won the first two, and I thought maybe she'd go for a three-peat, but she did not check in. And then I guess I apparently missed somewhere along the line that Bobby Arnis had kind of packed it in, at least for this part of the season. So he wasn't there either. So I did get Tony Jensen, though. So he's always a fun watch, and by pure happenstance, he ended up sitting him and his family ended up sitting behind me for the entire race. Obviously he did have to go down to the pits and race, but he came back and forth frequently. So I definitely got to to learn some stuff, none of which I'm going to share here. Every now and again, when you pick up stuff, you got to keep it here too, right? So none of it's fit to share. Just kind of overheard it, so we're going to leave it at that. But it was an interesting listen. I did get a chance to talk to him a little bit too. Wished him luck, and after he'd won, I congratulated his family. One thing's for sure, though, me and him watched the race the same way. So, um, Tony Jensen is a Hornet driver here in Wissota country, for those who don't know. And he's well known around our parts for having probably the most pumped victory celebration of anybody around these parts. And it feels completely genuine because I was watching a race with him and I were both a hooting and a hollering. I mean, I felt bad for for Sherry at one point with me on the side and Tony behind her. We were just I get into a race like that, I'm always making noises. He was doing the same thing. It was pretty cool. So, definitely from what I gathered, that celebration is legit. And I've said many times, winning is freaking fun. So celebrate it. So it makes perfect sense why Tony enjoys it because you work hard for those. So you should enjoy the damn thing. That's what I saw. But another technical difficulty, my second monitor decided to just shut off for some reason. So we'll get her back up here. There she goes. So that was really fun. Tony actually didn't end up winning the Hornet feature. So that was pretty awesome. He started fourth. He was the first within one lap, and it was lights out from there. The best race of the bunch was probably the Mod 4s. Keith Stell had to come back from I think somewhere around sixth to take the lead in when he was so clearly the fastest guy there the whole night. It was interesting watching just how kind of the storyline was how long till he gets by and takes the lead. And once he did, it was lights out from there. I do have to admit, I don't know how I feel about Mod 4's qualifying in. So that was something they did new for this show because they were technically the premier class of the big show. So they timed in and it made for some interesting laps. Could definitely tell those guys hadn't done it much at all, if ever before. So there was definitely a learning curve, but all the same, qualifying is a tough sell in any event. But if they're not going super duper fast, I don't know how much it adds. But it was interesting all the lesson. I can appreciate that they tried something. So take it for what it is. And then the Pure Stocks was a fairly solid race. Jake Smith led the whole way. He second finishing. Austin Carlson was on his bumper the entire way, but couldn't get around. All in all, great night of racing. I got to give them credit. They did go the big show route for this, and they should have because this is the season capping event for these three classes. This is essentially their Wissota 100, and so they did go all out. We had four wides and big victory lane celebrations and fireworks and the whole nine, and I appreciated the heck out of it. It may have added a little bit of time to the show, but this is a big show. This is their everyone come together and let's all compete and crown a champion for our sanction. And so it should be celebrated. I enjoyed it. You can't go wrong with a little pomp and circumstances, I say. So I enjoyed the entire show, and I'm glad I went. It was a nice start to also what I'll be doing this weekend, and I'll mention that here in a minute. But it was a nice start to Wissota 100 week, and I enjoyed the heck out of it. So definitely something I could see myself going back to again. And Carter's not here, but I know what he did, and we talked about it last week, and it's a cool show and it's a relevant show. So we'll go ahead and talk about that. I'm laughing because I saw my mouse because again, one man show. I've got to do a bunch of stuff. I didn't realize, so bear with me. Nonetheless, so Carter was in River Cities for the John Sites Memorial. They did get rained out on Thursday, unfortunately, which was going to be the Howie Shield Memorial or the prelude to the Johnny, and it was going to be the NLRA's capping show. That got rained out. They did get the entirety of the John Sites Memorial in though, and so the mods were running two independent shows, and then the other three classes had a 2-day format. The mods on Friday was actually 3,092 to win, and that was the big Al Delaney Memorial, and Bryce Ward picked up the big check there. So congratulations, Bryce. And then Saturday was the remaining features for the classes going. The headliner was Wissota late models, 92 laps, 99,200 or 9,200 bucks. I did learn, so I'd questioned Carter if they had a break, and neither of us knew. I learned via TikTok comment, so take it with a grain of salt. But as I was informed, they do have a break, but they don't inform the drivers ahead of time when that break's going to occur. And if that's true, that is 100% the way to do a break. If you gotta have one, it should be a bit of a curveball, and there should be some window for which you could have it. But you probably don't need to even tell them the window, and the window probably can move a little bit depending on race situation too. So I just like it way better if we don't say when or approximately when, and we call it when is makes sense, and then we finish out the race. So that's if that's true, I like it. But then on the big show, so the actual big show, the John Sites Memorial, Cole Schill picked up his first victory in that big show, and I believe the late model portion on Thursday is the Howie Show Memorial. So probably a pretty big and emotional win if I had to guess. So congratulations to Cole for picking that up. And then TPO picked up the mod victory in their independent show as well. So all in all, seemed like they battled a little bit of weather, but they got the race in and the lead up to it, everyone, I mean, not everyone, but everyone who was going said it was their favorite race weekend of the year. So something for me to consider up here in the long run because I definitely want to make it up there. And I was getting a bit of FOMO when we were when we were leading up to the show, and my entire feed was filled with people saying it's the greatest weekend. So I'll probably make it there. And anyway, so that's what Carter and I did. Carter's not even here to tell you about it, but I'll fill you in. So that's what Carter and I did this past weekend. I personally did also follow some racing. So I watched the World 100 from the grandstands at Granite City. So another good thing about Granite City is the cell coverage is pretty solid. So good enough to stream a race. Ricky Thornton Jr. picked up the $72,000 win there. Uh, I was watching with no or little audio, so I have like my own Josh's version of what happened, but it looked like RTGA got to the front and was never really challenged from there. And so I'm gonna go with that narrative because that's what I saw. And in the back, it looked like there might have been a little bumping and banging. I saw Chris Madden, who I obviously was rooting for, I think got caught up with Nick Hoffman and had some choice words and some other stuff. But RTJ, for the most part, once he was to the lead, he was just gone, and gets the big dub. I think that's his first like crown jewel from Eldora victory, so he gets the monkey off his back there. The thought I had too is it adds a little intrigue to the Dirt Track World Championship. So Lucas has the playoff system, and that final race is a fairly large part in determining the championship. So him clicking off a victory there adds a little bit more intrigue. Jonathan Davenport maybe isn't as invincible as we thought heading into the dream. So interesting storyline to come out of that for RTJ. And then I I also did I kept track of the North Star Nationals from Mississippi Thunder. The headliner for me personally was the North Star Modified Series. They ran two races. Joe Chisholm swept the weekend, so Joe's getting hot when money season kicks in. So keep an eye out for him in the next couple of weeks. And then that was their season capping event. So their season has concluded now, and Brandon Davis was the inaugural championship winner. Um, and they definitely made it interesting. So uh, Friday night, Brandon Davis and Jim Chisholm got into an incident, and from my perspective, Jim Chisholm was at fault. So I don't know if contact was made. There were pictures on social media that led to believe that there was some contact to be made. But in any event, I think when you are starting outside and you are more or less sideways, pinning a guy to the extreme bottom at the flag stand, you're probably in the wrong. If the only way that that guy can make it out of there is to run through you or loop it himself, it is not a good move. And I think we need to see some more of that. I don't I don't know how the hell we keep getting more and more incidents in that. And I'm the first to be all about aggressive driving. I've played competitive sports more or less my whole life, and I've coached competitive sports. I've taught, youth how to be aggressive in situations. And so I love me some aggressive driving, but there's a difference between aggressive driving and being a jackass. And I think we have to start calling people out on being jackasses. And in this particular instance, I think Joe Chisholm was driving like or Jim Chisholm, sorry, Joe, Jim Chisholm was driving like a jackass, and he's at fault for that incident. And I was giggling because the next day I was I was at the MPH, and I had a Jim Chisholm hoodie in my back of my truck, and should I have decided to put that on, I would have worn it just fine. So I am also a Jim Chisholm fan. So I'm just calling it like I see it. As a fan, I thought that was a jackass move, and I hope we don't see more of it from him. And if we do, we'll do, like we'll talk about it when it happens. But I also like aggressive driving, and sometimes the lines do get crossed, and I think, you know. it sucks, and I'm not justifying it for anyone, but I also feel how Brandon Davis can stand on the top of his car and give Jim a standing ovation for the bullshit he pulled. That also makes sense, and I respect the hell out of that. Or walking off the track and giving him the one finger salute, totally warranted. I mean, I'd have been pissed too. So I don't know. That's my take on it. It's becoming a bit of a thing. Even Kenny Wallace, I noticed on Tuesday, had posted a question to the masses why there's seem appears to be more physical altercations, and I think in some part that stems from there's more physical driving on the track. And to the extent we want to talk about physical driving on the track, I'm here for aggressive driving, and understand that sometimes that's going to result in dudes being jackasses, and we should just all say they were a jackass in that instance and move on. And our fandom shouldn't matter. If you're a real fan of somebody, you should be able to tell them the truth. At least that's how I approach it. That's how me and my buddies, me and my true friends, that's how we operate. If you're being a dipshit, you better expect that I'm going to tell you you're being a dipshit, and then we're going to work through it and we're going to move on and we're still going to be best friends because that's how life works. So I'm sorry for my rant on that, but that's how I feel about a lot of. I'm probably going to talk about more as we run through the rest of the results. Hell, let's just jump into it now. So Mods Gone Wild happened this past weekend, and Mike Harrison won $10,000, and that was a heck of a race. Him and Michael Long really dueled it out for probably a good third of the race towards the end. And with 10 to go, Mike decided to make his move, and they battled for a couple of laps. And as they were sorting it out, um, I long. I'm trying to recall exactly, but essentially Long was on the outside. Mike threw a slider. They didn't really touch. They bumped a tiny going in. They cleared each other. They didn't touch. Long looped it, went to the back of the field because he looped it. That kind of killed what was an awesome race, and Mike Harrison went on to the win. And I didn't hear nothing about that. But somehow a driver who locked in on Friday. So Friday they had a qualifying race. Mike Harrison also won that and another $2,500. But the top six of that were supposed to lock in. I did watch that on Racing Dirt, and Chase Holland locked in. So when I checked the results on Saturday, I was a bit confused why he was DQ'd. I didn't think much of it. Other than I saw a video pop up yesterday, and turns out he punched some dude in the face who is, as Chase Holland tells the story, in his pit, ranting and raving. And I don't want to put words in his mouth, but it sounds like he alluded to cussing at and yelling at one of the women in his pits, and he decided he had had enough of it. And so he uh he stood on business. He threw a couple of punches, and that happened. And so the guy was in his pits ranting and raving about how a different driver he felt had and driven him hard. And maybe he did, maybe he didn't. But I don't think going to a dude's pit all hot and bothered is the way to solve it either. So, Jesus. Mods this weekend apparently were just out here going wild. And yeah, I don't have any opinion on the Chase Holland thing. I just wanted to bring it up that that's another incident where tempers had flared, and that one sort of went from a rough driving incident to some people throwing punches in the pits, and now we're just like, what in actual hell? Um, as a dude, I get sometimes it just comes to a fisticuffs. It shouldn't usually though, and I can't imagine a good reason to settle an argument with a fist, at least in the pits with all the people around and everything else going on. But I don't know. I don't know. That's my 2 cents. I guess I said I wasn't going to weigh in. I do have an opinion. It just feels stupid. It feels stupid, and I get people being pissed off and wanting to voice their opinion and tell someone they feel like they were driven rough, but I don't know that it comes with follow-on threats, but that's apparently what we got. Um, you know, I don't know that getting tired of some dude shit and punching him in the face is also the way to go about it if you're not being threatened. So I don't know what happened. I can't say if anyone was threatened. I'm just saying it's just what what the hell. Anyway, moving on. So interesting show, interesting news, and sort of a bit of a through line for a couple of shows I was following, and we're getting to the point where there's like like I mentioned, Kenny Wallace and other people trying to figure out what the hell is going on. So I have opinions. Maybe I'll flesh them out with someone else who we can have sort of a debate with, but not the point now. Nonetheless, moving on. So IMCA Super Nats was this whole past week. It finally concluded. We were following along. I didn't watch much of it, so I'm just going to stick to running down the relevant winners. But T Dub Tim Ward picked up the mod championship. Jake McBurney in the stocks, Jake Shao in the sport mods, and Dylan Nelson in the hobby stocks were the big winners on Saturday. So anyway, with that, let's go ahead and transition what Carter and I will be doing this upcoming weekend. So turns out we're going to be doing the same thing. I mentioned Carter is currently live streaming and he's live streaming the Wissota Late Model Challenge Series from the Wissota 100. And that's where I'm going to be on Saturday, and I'm super looking forward. So I went for the first time last year, and I really respected the effort and again the pomp and circumstances and the event level atmosphere they put together. So I'm super excited to go back and and Carter's going to be there. I actually, truth be told, tried to swing something so I could film with Carter today, but we just couldn't make it work. But we gave her the old college try, and it didn't work out. But maybe we'll do something on Saturday. So the Wissota 100 is where I'm heading. We've got, I think it's 5 classes. So we've got late models, modifieds, Midwest mods, super stocks, and street stocks. So 5 classes. Tuesday is when everything gets kicked off. So yesterday, I guess, we had the Wissota Challenge Series complete one of their two remaining shows, and then we also had practice for the 5 other classes. Wednesday is when things kind of kick into full gear. We've got the final Wissota Challenge Series race of the season. And as Carter and I mentioned last week, that's pretty tight point battles. So it could stand to be a very interesting race on Wednesday. And then we also have preliminary showdowns for the remainder of the classes. And the way it's going to work is heats are going to set the feature lineups each night of the 24 starting cars. The top 8 will lock into the big feature on Saturday. And so on Wednesday, we get the inside row. On Thursday, we get the outside row. And then on Friday, we get the middle row. And then they also have the opportunity, if you lock in, say you lock in 8 and you think you can do better, you can basically re-roll, throw it back in and choose to start 1 or 2 features depending on when you locked in and where you locked in, to get a better starting position for the big Wissota 100 feature. So it's a pretty cool show, pretty interesting setup and lead up into Saturday's feature. So by the time we get to Saturday, we're gonna really have sort of the best of the best locked in and in good spots. And they start this thing 3 wide, and it's pretty rad. And then I also enjoy the fact that they start 33 cars, and 3 of the cars are picked on Saturday in the drivers' meeting. So it's just random draw. If you get picked, you make the feature. I believe if and it's drawn out of non-qualified drivers, so there's no risk of drawing a guy who already locked in. So you have a chance before racing even starts on Saturday, before the last chance features start, to just lock it in. And so that I do dig that. It's sort of a reward for coming out racing the whole week. Hasn't gone your way, but you've got one chance to maybe get lucky and get in the big feature. So I appreciate that. And so that's what I and Carter will be doing, and probably what we will talk a lot about, maybe on Saturday and then coming into the week following as well. So while I'll be pretty busy doing that, there are a couple other things I'll be keeping an eye on. So the big one for me is the USMTS Red, White, and Blue Nationals is this weekend at Tri-State Speedway in Oklahoma. So they got a 3-day show. Looks like we've got 3K, 5K, and then 15,000 on Saturday. So pretty big check coming down the pipe there. And I'm actually really interested to pay attention to this show because I think it's going to serve as a really good preview for the Mod Wars 100, which is next weekend at Heart of Texas. So stands to be stands to be a fairly good field as this one, I think. That's my hunch. I could be proven wrong, but my hunch says we might get a very stout field and maybe see some cars we don't normally see out on the road with USMTS. So stay tuned for that. I'm definitely looking forward to it. And then on the late model side of things, we've got Flow Racing Night in America is joining us back. So they They get their fall slate of races started back up tomorrow at Volunteer Speedway for 20 grand, and then that leads into the World of Outlaws weekend in Georgia, where we're at Needmore on Friday for 12,000 and Sonoya and on Saturday for 15,000. And then a fan favorite of Carter's and I, guys, we do have the Mars late models are in action this weekend. So this is an interesting one. They're actually at Davenport Thursday and Friday, or no, I'm sorry, it's Friday, Saturday at Davenport for 5,000 and 10,000. I've always enjoyed Davenport. It's a nice little small flat track. I mean, we're all probably familiar with it, but I like that it's super wide and it just seems like there's a bajillion lanes on it. And so, um, haven't seen as much stuff there since I think the promoters changed, and I don't know why we haven't seen as much stuff there, but definitely at least gonna probably check out the highlights because I think late models on this track are always a banger. And then with that, it means Josh, it's time for one for the road. So I will go first because I'm here. I actually am keeping an eye also on a show this weekend at Deer Creek, a place I was just at recently and intend to go very soon. But they've got the USRA Stock Car Nationals, and we've got 10,000 to win on Saturday. So that is very noteworthy. 10K stock cars is definitely noteworthy. And then I also do like the added touch. They've also got a 1K non-qualifier as well. So good little chunk of change if you make the trek and don't make it, you still can race for, a grand for the non-qualifiers. And then they all also have hobby stocks racing for 1,500. So cool show. I know Carter at one point had intended to maybe go to this, and then he got the tap for the Wissota 100, so those plans fell through. But definitely an interesting show to keep an eye on. And if you're one of my listeners and you're in the area, something to think about going to do. So figured I'd throw that out there for y'all. And then Carter's not here, but he sent one along and he said the JJ McCarthy era has arrived. And I second that. I watched the game and and I'm a lifelong Vikings fan. I have known some misery and terrible quarterbacks, and there's a long season and a long career ahead of us. So things obviously are going to evolve and change. But one thing I just noticed about JJ McCarthy that was felt so different than so many other Vikings quarterbacks is he didn't fold immediately under pressure. The dude has some fight in him and maybe a little crazy too. At one point, I definitely thought I saw crazy eyes going, and I'm cool with it. Honestly, you metaphor for life. It's gonna knock you down. It's gonna kick your ass, and sometimes it's not gonna be fair. But you got to get up and you got to keep fighting. And so, like, I like when my quarterbacks at least have that. So it was good to see. I've watched a lot of Vikings football, and I've seen a lot of dudes when the chips are down, they're down further, and that ain't winning in football games, and that ain't winning at life. So, um, I was super enthused that we got one of those quarterbacks that I think's got a little dog in him, and so I'm excited to see how this season plays out. But anyway, with that, I did say I was going to try to make it brief. I hope I made it entertaining as well. And keep an eye out this weekend. There may be some stuff with Carter and I at the Wissota 100. There may not be. I did go through all the effort of buying some stuff, so I'm not joking when I said I was thinking about it. Um, so maybe we'll do some on location stuff. But nonetheless, if you're still here, please hit a like, maybe a comment, and I look forward to catching y'all next week. Thank you so much for hanging out.